Warning: the Not Real Art podcast is intended for creative audiences only. The Not Real Art podcast celebrates creativity and creative culture worldwide. It contains material that is fresh, fun, and inspiring and is not suitable for boring old art snobs. Now, let's get started and enjoy the show.
Welcome to Not Real Art, the podcast that celebrates creative culture worldwide. You're joined by your favorite host, Man One and Sourdough here.
Yo,
what up, Man One?
What's up? How you doing?
Dude, man, I'm living my quarantine life. How you doing?
That's quarantine life?
I mean, I would be living my best quarantine life, but turns out my 7-year-old and my 3-year-old have other plans.
Be living your best quarantine life if you were quarantined from the family.
Exactly right. Yeah. You know, all these memes and bullshit going around about, oh, learn new skills, read new books, binge watch Netflix.
Yeah.
Oh, hell no.
No.
Clearly the assholes that write that shit don't have kids climbing on them.
Right. I actually saw some stuff on Twitter where people refusing to teach their kids. They're like, no, but
what?
Not as a joke. They're very serious. It says like, my kid is in preschool or first grade or whatever.
Yeah.
You're giving me handouts to give to him, whatever. But what he really needs is social activity. He needs to be with other kids. That's what he really needs right now. He doesn't need to be sitting down trying to fill out this paperwork, right? So for my child's mental health, I'm not going to do, and plus I have a full-time job that I have to do at home, and it's just so much stress going on right now. So for my child's mental health, I'm not going to do any schooling with him. I'm just going to let him run around, have fun, and play. He doesn't need to be worried about what's going on with this whole pandemic and doing stuff that a normal first grader wouldn't be doing normally, which is sit there and just fill out paperwork. So that's some of the take I've seen on there.
So you're telling, this is a revelation to me, by the way.
Yeah.
So what you're telling me is I can just fucking quit. I can literally just be like, you know what? I'm not teaching my kids. That's not my job.
I've seen threads on Twitter about it. People are just yanking their kids up.
Don't tease me, man.
Every day they're just yanking their kids.
I've said from day one that the homeschooling will kill me before the virus does.
I'm just saying, there's alternatives.
I mean, the second grade shit is no joke. I'm like literally like 5 hours a day dealing with it. You know, and me and the missus, we split it up. But my daughter, you remember how the substitute teacher always got the short end of the stick? Always got harassed. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, between my daughter's mom and I, guess who's the substitute teacher? And
they're throwing spit wads at you probably all day long.
Dude, I am so the substitute teacher. When her mom comes, it's like best behavior.
Of course.
Yeah. I walk in, spitballs.
Yeah, I see it. Well, maybe you need to walk out on the job. You need to protest.
Man, oh man. Well, I tell you, it's no joke.
Forget your kids' mental health. What about your mental health? You know, what about that?
Well, there was a funny meme going around talking about this generation of kids will be known as the generation that was homeschooled by day drinkers. It's like,
maybe you should.
How am I coping? Beer.
That'd be kind of a cool, I don't know, that's a cool test. Let's see how inebriated you have to be for your wife to finally fire you as the teacher of her kids.
She's just looking for an excuse.
You know what I'm saying? Do a 6-pack tomorrow morning. Let me know how that goes. If it doesn't, if you're still on the job tomorrow night, I say double it. Let's just see at what point is it like, okay, these kids can't.
Yeah. Our kids' intellectual development isn't as important as getting this asshole out of the house.
Right.
Yeah, man. Yeah, well.
You just got to find a way to get yourself fired. That's all that matters.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Because you're always bringing knowledge.
Because, dude, you're not a quitter. You're not a quitter.
Rehab is for quitters.
Yeah, I know you're not a quitter. But, getting fired is different.
Well, that's right. I mean, there's almost honor in being fired, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Quitters, I mean,
there's no honor.
Losers. You know, quitting on principle, that's bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to get fired.
That's right. Okay. Well, things are looking up for me now suddenly. Feeling much better about my week. This is a good segue, actually, because really what we're getting at is mental health.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
We're getting at mental health.
Yeah, but whose mental health? Your kids or yours? I think it's yours.
Well, it's really I can only control my own mental health. I can't control their mental health. I mean, as much as I would like to help them be happy, sometimes they're just pissed off and I can't seem to do anything about it.
Yeah.
But for me, I can do what I can do to self-soothe. Whatever they call it.
As you're wearing your Guinness hat.
As I'm wearing my Guinness hat here. Haven't had a Guinness.
Is that appropriate attire for a teacher to show up in their Guinness hat?
Well, it is at homeschool. Homeschooling, the rules are there's smoking in the bathroom, by the way. The rules are much more lenient. We do encourage all kinds of bad behavior, but today's guest is great given the subject of mental health.
Of course.
Our listeners probably will recall that we were planning to have our conference, our Not Real Art conference, in March. And due to the coronavirus, aka COVID-19, we did the right thing and canceled the conference. And of course, we did it before we were mandated because we saw this shit coming.
Yeah. That was a great call, by the way. I got to give you props on that.
Yeah. Well, it was a stressful one, but it was the right one. So, but one of the speakers that we had lined up for the conference was a gentleman by the name of Bret Hofstein, who's a licensed and published psychotherapist who works with artists in LA. And, interestingly, at the time before the pandemic, the rationale behind the panel that we were going to have with him was this idea of these are stressful times. How can we manage our stress and how can we be creative when we're stressed? What are the tools and the techniques and the things that we can be doing to take care of ourselves and our mental health? And even if we don't have money, what are the free resources? What are the things we can do at home? What about self-medication? I mean, people are smoking a lot more medicinal marijuana now to deal with stress and things. So Bret Hofstein was going to come and talk. And so as a run-up to his talk at the conference, we had him on the podcast. And so I sat down with Bret a few weeks ago and recorded this interview that we're going to share. So, I thought we'd just do that today. In terms of his bio, I'll just read here what I have. So Bret Hofstein is a licensed and published psychotherapist working in Los Angeles. He specializes in depression, anxiety, borderline personality disorders. Bret incorporates the use of EMDR and psychodynamic relationship-based modalities. Don't ask me what that means. in his private practice, while focusing on adults, couples, and workplace dynamics. Before becoming a therapist 14 years ago, Bret worked in Hollywood for Scott Rudin and Roger Corman. But over the last several years as a therapist, he's been helping artists and musicians and filmmakers and writers deal with their mental health and helping them manage stress. Bret completed his undergrad degree at San Francisco State University in 1994 and got his graduate degree in clinical psychology at Antioch in 2004. So people can check him out at brethofstein.com for more information. Certainly, if anybody's looking for some help, he's a great guy. But without further ado, I say let's get into this interview. Sourdough and Bret Hofstein talking mental health.
Do it.
Bret Hofstein, welcome to Not Real Art.
I am happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you, my friend.
Thank you. Good to see you.
I understand you're a licensed psycho.
I've been a licensed psycho for almost 12 years now. And what I mean by psycho and what I think you're referencing is me being a psychotherapist in Los Angeles. Sir. Oh, it
was a typo. It's missing a...
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
I had to work through the psycho part in my own therapy.
Isn't that the joke among therapists? Like we're really just, well-adjusted psychos?
Yeah, essentially. Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychologist and theorist, said that anybody in the healing game is a wounded healer, meaning that something obviously perhaps traumatic happened to them when they were younger. And that made them feel that they could go ahead and help others because they understood the topography of mental anguish and pain.
Was that your journey? Did something traumatic happen to you?
That's a really good question. I mean, there's small T trauma and large capital T trauma. Mm-hmm. Someone who gets hit by a car, that might be for them a small T trauma. For some, maybe not so much. For me, I think probably just a cascade of small traumas along the way, you know? I mean, the product of divorce, 9, 10 years old, the shuffling back and forth between mom and dad's house, which was very, very difficult and very, very painful for me, leaving one parent and going to another parent. I think I'm a therapist because of what happened to me in my childhood. And I'm also, you know, only child, and I had to go ahead and do a lot of my own self-soothing.
Yeah.
There was a lot of that.
Well, you're Gen X, right? We're both Gen X.
Gen X, baby.
So is it safe to say that Gen X is sort of the generation of divorce? Like, was divorce a prominent thing prior to Gen X?
That's a great question. I don't even know what the math would be on that.
I wondered about that.
I don't know about the stats of that.
I remember vividly, right? You're walking to school with my buddy Larry in 6th grade, and we're walking to school in the morning, and he's like clearly upset, and I was like, "What's going on? You know, what's wrong?" And he tells me his parents are getting divorced, and I remember not knowing what to say. I had no words. I couldn't even imagine what that kind of.
How old were you?
I was in 6th grade. So what were you,
12?
11 or 12?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, just obviously we have so many friends growing up, right, who got divorced or whatever the case, their parents got divorced. And it just got me wondering, because I'm Gen X as well. I mean, was our generation the first generation to kind of really deal with divorce?
I think it's a great question. It's very possible that our generation maybe did have to deal with more divorce than others. Mm-hmm. Maybe it was more permissible, maybe not as stigmatized as maybe it would have been maybe in the early 70s or 60s. Mm-hmm. Maybe. Who knows? Yeah. You know, I think it's an interesting question. I keep thinking about, like, you know, the middle 70s and leading into the 80s about drug culture. I mean, that, you know, I'm thinking about like Studio 54 and what was going on then, and people like maybe playing outside the house more. I don't know. Maybe it was more permissible, key parties, and then you start to go ahead and get introduced to other people in your life. Like, well, you know what? My husband or my wife's not making me happy anymore. And Mrs. Robinson down the block, well, she's getting divorced, it sounds like. So maybe you might be right.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just fascinating. But yeah, we all have our junk, our stuff, right? And it's so fascinating to hear about people's journeys, because obviously everything is so personal. But, you know, you and I happen to go back. We've known each other for a while, and I so appreciate you coming on the show, by the way. I'm super grateful that you're coming to our conference.
Can't wait.
On March 21st.
Can't wait. Thank you.
And, you know, our little chat today is kind of a primer to our chat at the conference, because these are such stressful times. And I mean, life is stressful. I'm not one of these folks that acts like this time in history is the most stressful time in history, because that's bullshit. It's not. Stress is always, in many ways, life is better today empirically than life's ever been in history. That doesn't mean to say that there aren't major problems that still need to be addressed. Of course, human nature is fucked up, but anyway, being an artist, it's hard to be creative. It's hard to create when you're under stress. And your panel, when you come to the conference, we're calling it Relax and Create, how to manage your stress and increase your productivity. But I don't care if you're an artist or if you're a professional of any kind, stress is going to impact your performance. And I mean, you must see this in your practice all the time with your clients, right? Like, how are people dealing with stress these days?
In a lot of different ways. You know, I do see a lot of people in the industry. I see a lot of executives on all levels. I see writers and directors and actors and all of that. And a lot of them, fortunately, can go ahead and afford to come see me. So there's a great outlet that they can come see me once a week or once every other week or twice a week, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. So what do you charge an hour? You don't mind me asking? $1 million.
My initial rate's $250.
Okay. Right. Now we're in LA, just for our listeners' sort of benefit. We're in Los Angeles. It must be a very competitive space as a therapist, right? I mean, there's a lot of therapists here. Yes. You built your practice over many years. How many years have you been
12 years licensed. I've been practicing for 14 or 15 years, but I've been licensed for 12.
Right. So, I mean, you didn't start out at $225 an hour.
You know, I started off when I was a beginning therapist. I just gotten licensed. I just wanted to work.
Yeah.
I would charge $40 a session. Right. Yeah. If you could pay more than that, great.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to get those hours in.
Right.
Yeah. So my rate's $250, $225. Yeah. You know, I do slide if necessary.
Right.
So,
but I mean, to be fair though, I'm sure it strikes me based on what I do understand, because I have a therapist and we go to therapy, and, you know, therapy's been a part of my life. That feels like a pretty average price. Like, you're not on the high end, you're not on the low end. It feels like you're kind of in the middle. Yeah.
I think there are some therapists out there charging upwards of $300. I don't think that you can get much more than that. In New York, they charge a lot more because of how much it costs to live in New York.
Right.
But I think I'm pretty much the average right now.
Are these kinds of things covered by insurance? Do people have insurance for you?
Yeah, some insurance policies, depending upon what you have, will go ahead and cover anywhere from 30 to 70%. Just depends on what your insurance coverage is.
Right. So your clients, right, who work in the entertainment business, many of your clients work in the entertainment business, writers, actors, producers, directors. How is today's geopolitical situation, environmental situation, socioeconomical situation, how are you seeing these sort of systemic macro environmental factors impacting people's mental health?
Depends on where they are on the totem pole of their industry.
Okay.
Right? The higher up they are, obviously a lot of pressure, a lot of weight to hold up there, right? They seem to be faring better because they've put in the work. They've been lucky in getting to where they are. Those that are still fledgling in some ways in their new pursuit, it's harder. I see a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, a lot of worry among screenwriters, new screenwriters, directors, actors. The competition has been fierce in this industry for, 30, 40 years, right? Yeah. There's a lot of competition. And a lot of the actors, a lot of the artists that I see get frustrated by having to play the game. Yeah. Right? And I talk often about this in therapy that you can hate the players. Yeah. Don't hate the game. Right. If you hate the game.
If you're opting in to play the game, right, you've opted in. Like you can't, the game is the game.
The game is the game. When I first started off as a therapist, right, I had to learn how to play the game. I think I think that all of us are peddling a product. Yeah. Every one of us, you, me, anybody, everybody is peddling a product.
There's rent to pay. We got to make money.
Right. So we're all selling something. Right. And so I've said to a lot of my clients, you are your own walking billboard. Yeah. Right. So you've got to sell, right? So a lot of the newer actors or directors, they kind of resent maybe some of the nepotism that can sometimes get in the way, right? Yeah, be frustrated by it. Don't resent it, right? Because the resentment, I think, was just going to go ahead and just really kill any sort of momentum. It's going to derail. You can be frustrated by it, but how badly do you want it? Yeah. First of all, right? I remember when I became a therapist, when I was working, I was going to grad school, and I had a vision of what I wanted my therapy life to look like. It was in an office, talking with someone like yourself, one-on-one. I didn't want to go any other route, and that was the vision. It was a singular focus, and I wasn't going to let anything derail me from that. Yeah. Obviously, my pursuit, it has been easier, right? Because it's a lot more structured. You do the classes, and you do the hours, and you do this, and you do that. You're on the right path. With acting or with directing or with writing or with painting or with sculpting, you can put out the product, right? But it's so hard to get anybody to read it, to buy it, to see it, right? There are all of these variables that a lot of artists, I think, inevitably do get frustrated by because it's so much easier actually to write the script, direct the short film, do the painting, whatever it is, make the music. But getting it out there to the masses is so hard, and that's what happens to a lot of these artists is that their dreams get killed because they can't get that stuff seen or read or heard.
Well, and by the way, what I appreciate about what you're saying is what you're talking about doesn't come from some theory or some book you read. I mean, you actually have lived it because being a therapist is, as I understand it, like your third career, right? At one time, you were a professional writer.
Yeah, I mean, professional, not I didn't
striving, aspiring.
I mean, I have the empirical knowledge which allows me to, I think, engender myself to my clients. Yeah, because I've been there.
Real life experience. That's the phrase I was trying to look for a minute ago. Like you came into being a therapist with real life experience. Because how old were you when you became licensed?
I was 38.
Okay, 38, right? Kind of midlife, so to speak.
Whoa.
Right. Whoa. Or on the low end.
Holy smokes. That's a bit terrifying.
Newsflash.
Shit.
Newsflash.
Got 26 years left.
But you had lived a lot of life. You had worked in Hollywood. I think you even worked in finance for a while. And then you decide, you know what, I want to help people, and you go into therapy. And so what I'm guessing is that your real life experience in these other industries has helped you be a better therapist.
1,000%. When I was 25, 26, I had gone to college in San Francisco, stayed up there for a little while, and then I wanted to get into the industry. Mm-hmm. And I moved back down to LA. I'm from LA. I moved back down here when I was 26. I got a job working for free for Roger Corman, the famous B movie director who, he was the mentor to Ron Howard and Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola. And I remember just walking into his film production company completely cold. And I introduced myself and they said, okay, here's a script, read it and tell us what you think. So I did that for a little while. I read some scripts and told them what I thought. And then I wanted to get on the production end of it. Yeah. And I worked as a PA for free again, which I do advocate to people that are in the industry. If you want to go ahead and be behind the scenes, if you want to be a gaffer or a grip or a PA, the industry loves free labor. If you want to get in there, work for free, pay your dues. Then, I was a Roger Corman for a little while. I was a production assistant, then an assistant, a second AD, and then a second AD. And then I got offered a job at working at Paramount for Scott Rudin, a famous producer of many, many movies, Ransom, and now does a lot of the Wes Anderson movies. I was there for maybe 6 to 8 months and realized I needed to get out of here because it was very cutthroat. I didn't like a lot of the players. Yeah. It was rubbing me all the wrong way. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate enough then to go ahead and work with my dad for a little while in stocks during the late 90s. And then had an epiphany in my own therapy where a therapist said to me, you'd be a great therapist. And I was like, oh my, yeah, that's what I'm going to do the rest of my life. It was so powerful. I think I cried for like 3 days in a row. Wow. I was so emotionally overcome by the idea that, wow, I can do this for the next 40, 50 years. I can be a therapist. And then that began, and here we are, 16 years
Was later. There a feeling of, because I'm guessing you were so moved in part because, you had a kind of a vision, there was clarity, and yet at the same time, I'm guessing on the flip side of that, there was this kind of weight of responsibility. It's like, oh shit, I have to do this, right?
It wasn't necessarily a wave of responsibility. A weight of responsibility. I was fortunate because I could make that move, that transition. Yeah. I had done fairly okay in the stock market, with my dad and going back to grad school. I was lucky that, I could still trade stocks while going to school and I could still really put it 110% into my school, which was needed at that time. So I was lucky. I was more excited than anything else about this.
Motivated.
You know what it was? It was about, and I think this is important, it was about identity. I think a lot of people, who am I? Who am I, a father? Am I a mother? Or am I a banker? Am I a lawyer? For me, it's like, I didn't have any kids. My girlfriend at the time, now my wife, we're living together. I was a stock trader, but my life was all about making money, which I hated. It didn't have a lot of soul attached to it. So for me, it's like saying that I was a therapist. Yeah, I guess you could say there was a bit of ego attached to that, but it really resonated with me, the identity of being a therapist.
Yeah. Some might call it God's work, right? Firefighters, teachers, therapists, physicians, doctors, obviously, the people on the front line of well-being. This is important work.
Yeah. Circling back to what you're talking about, like even with the people that I work with and what do they do during these tumultuous or difficult times with, we have an election coming up. Interesting enough, I don't have a lot of Trumpers in my office, which is interesting. I have a lot more of the people who want him out. There is the concern for them of 4 more years, right? And what that might look like, right? So we'd tackle that anxiety, right? Yeah. But hey, man, I'm a big advocate of exercise, sleep, and nutrition. Yeah. If you can't afford therapy, right? You can't afford my rate, or you can't afford any rate. What are the things that you can do to go ahead and self-soothe? Right? To relax, to get centered, to get to refuel, to get grounded. Exercise, go for a walk, go for a 30-minute walk every single day. You'll see the benefits of that. Yeah. Right. Try to eat as clean as you can. Try to get enough water, get enough sleep. And also maybe relationships are also so important. Yeah. They talk about this perhaps looming epidemic of loneliness, that people are more lonely than ever. Right. There was an article in the Atlantic Monthly maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, title cover of Facebook is making us more lonely. Yeah. Which social media is doing. We're ironically more disconnected than we are connected because of social media. Yeah. right?
Somebody said social media makes those farther apart closer together, and those close together farther apart.
Completely. Right. Yes. I don't myself tend to do too much of the social media.
Yeah.
I try to unplug as much as possible.
Yeah.
I would recommend that. I daily will leave my office, leave my phone, and go for a walk in my work neighborhood for 15 minutes or a half an hour.
Sure.
Nobody could find me. The NSA can't find me. FBI can't find me.
Do
you think the NSA? Do you think that if I actually was, I guess they could. Even if my phone was in my office, the NSA could probably find me in about 5 minutes, even without any gear on me.
Yeah.
But I do recommend that people unplug.
You weren't aware of that chip that they planted,
Probably.
Yeah, you were out. No, but joking aside, I mean, we have to take responsibility, right, for our peace of mind, for our happiness. And it feels like it's so easy, right, to blame others or take, pass the buck or whatever. But if there's such power, right, in owning your reality and trying to take ownership of your own happiness and well-being and peace of mind, and that walk, a simple walk out of doors is like a metaphorical splash of cold water on the face, right? I mean, it's just like you're rebooting, you're sort of refreshing in those moments.
You're taking care of you in that moment. You're in that. What's why I think like leaving your phone at home or in the office, wherever it is, just to go out and just, I know that, we want to go ahead and stay connected to our families in case of emergencies and blah, blah, blah. I think if you can go ahead and allow yourself and give yourself permission to be untethered, to have the hooks out of you with your phone and just go ahead and just be you.
Yeah.
Right? Just be sourdough for a moment.
I can't help myself,
right?
But be sourdough.
Right? Is that you've got a lot of hooks in you, a lot of people who are attached to you. You've got a lot of responsibilities. And if you could just go ahead and just be Scott, sourdough, for 15 minutes is quite refueling.
I feel like it's so tempting and so easy to overcomplicate things. And some things are very complicated. The idea of going to get psychological help for mental wellness or what have you, I mean, that feels kind of daunting. It might feel expensive, but this idea of a walk I love that. I tend to think of, I try, of course, this is years of trial and error, I guess, coming to bear, but eventually I got to one point in my own life where I'm trying to identify core drivers. So it's like, oh, this is symptomatic of something bigger. So, for example, you mentioned the phone. I realized I was one of the early adopters, I think, on Facebook. And then at some point along the way, I realized this is actually kind of driving me crazy. And I just checked out for a while. And that was even before other people that I knew started getting on. But I'll see that. I'll recognize that, like, oh, streaming through my Instagram is actually making me really unhappy. Right now.
Yeah.
Maybe I should just not look at my Instagram for a week.
Yeah. Admittedly, actually, I took Instagram off my phone because I didn't like that I would maybe go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And they talk about with any of these social media things about it, there's a dopamine dump.
Sure.
Right? You get a hit of dopamine when you get a text message or an email or a like on a Facebook.
Somebody loves me.
Somebody loves me, that constant validation. And then it becomes a drug, right? You're chasing it, right? You're chasing, I need more, more and more. And for you though, you started to feel not good about yourself physically or mentally when you take that chase?
It just sort of depends. If I'm streaming through, I've noticed a few things. So over the years, so if I happen to be looking at a lot of artists' profiles, I start feeling like I'm not that creative. I'm not that talented. I'm not that, if I'm looking at a lot of Instagram accounts that happen to be travel related, I start feeling like, oh my God, I'm not seeing the world. I'm not going out. If I happen to be looking at profiles of people who are particularly fit or athletic or whatever, I start feeling really fat and out of shape. Like, it is amazing how that happens, but it's like clockwork.
Yeah. I recommend anybody that has depression on my roster, stay away from these things because they're not going to be helpful, because you're going to be tempted to compare yourself. Right. Like, oh, these people are having much better lives than I am.
Well, so this is probably a bit ironic or contradictory that I'm going to plug a Instagram account right now, but this is exactly why.
I'll put it back on my phone now. Then.
Right. One of my favorite Instagram accounts right now is one called Influencers in the Wild, which it's, because influencers, right, are so, people envy them because they're curating and directing these very sort of idyllic images, which of course are bullshit, largely. And so anyway, this Instagram account that I'm getting a lot of joy out of these days is sort of like influencers in the wild. So, just shit going wrong. So somebody trying to shoot the perfect photo, and then of course they fall over, or somebody says something, inappropriate.
It's the jackass approach.
It's the candid camera, jackass approach. But anyway, yeah, man. I mean, like I try to think about these core drivers, like what's stressing us out. And I feel like we live in LA, so traffic, for example, is a big one, right? So, but yet there's no way around it, right? I mean, you have to drive somewhere. So what can we do while we're in the car? What can we do while we're driving to help mitigate the stress and mitigate the,
Yeah, I think driving is I certainly can get frustrated with the traffic in Los Angeles. I'm born and raised in LA. It's certainly gotten a lot worse. I try to now, when I'm driving and I'm in traffic, it's like rather than get frustrated, I have to go ahead and somewhat surrender to it. Yeah. It's kind of like, I don't have any choice right now. No one's going to pluck me from the sky and put me closer to where I need to be. I'm here. Right. There's nothing I can do. I could stop and get in my car and go, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. And I'm going to go back home or I'm walking. Yeah. But you have to go ahead and just surrender to it. Right. Well, I want to circle back to something you said, though, about responsibility. Yeah. Irvin Yalom, he's a great psychoanalyst. He's a existential psychotherapist, and he's written a lot of really good books about existential therapy, existential psychotherapy, and taking responsibility. Yeah. Right. It's so important for people to take responsibility for their part. Right. Each one of us is responsible for any sort of dysfunction in our lives. Someone who's being abused in a relationship by some horrible partner, it could be a 95-5 split. That your responsibility of being in that bad relationship is 5%. Take responsibility then for that. Yep. Right. So I think responsibility is so important for people to go ahead and take stock of their side of the street. Is my side of the street clean, or can I make it cleaner? What kind of work do I need to do to go ahead and make it a bit cleaner? Yeah. What is that about? Why are we so, is it just human nature that we find it so hard to accept responsibility for our livelihood and for our well-being? I think there's a vulnerability component to it. I think that, say for instance, I had gotten to you today 15 or 20 minutes late. Scott, traffic, man. It was so bad. Yeah. And these drivers in LA versus, maybe I should have left a little earlier. Maybe I didn't do what I need to do. I'm so sorry, by the way, that I'm keeping you waiting. Me apologizing to you is I'm now being vulnerable. I made perhaps a mistake. I made an error versus, can I blame someone else for this? Who else can I blame? Because I don't want to go ahead and look, weak or look incompetent. Yeah. Who else can I blame? Yeah. But when you go ahead and you say, dude, I'm so sorry for being late. It neutralizes, I think, in the moment what's happened. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yes. Unless you continue to repeat the offense. Right. Then that gets old. If I show up every single day to you late, dude, I'm so sorry. Day 3 or 4 of that, you're going to be like, dude, your sorries now are a bit empty. You got to change the behavior and change the habit. Yeah. Right? Yeah. You've hit on a couple things that I think are powerful, and that is obviously accepting responsibility being your main point. But, earlier you said something about traffic and surrendering, like having realistic expectations about what is or isn't in your control, right? Being able to recognize that and just kind of, I don't know if this is the right word or not, compartmentalize and just say like, listen, I can't control this. I think that's a really good point. Using the parallels of somebody that puts hours and hours and hours into their acting career and they're not getting, the auditions or the roles versus somebody sitting in traffic. Both of these things you are at the mercy of all these other people in front of you in many ways, right? For an actor, you're at the mercy of a casting director, a producer, another actor, a director. So if you're doing the best that you can, right? And that's all you can say. It's like, I can go ahead and pat myself on the back that, hey, I'm still pursuing what I need to pursue, and I can only do what I can do. Because if you become frustrated by the, quote, traffic, you're eventually never going to leave the home. Right. And then where are you?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to go ahead and admit and accept that there is traffic and there are barriers to entry, and you've got to go ahead and navigate it, because what other choice do you have?
Well, I feel like, we all have our strategies, right? We all have our ways of coping. I tend to think about the environment that I'm in, right? And what in that environment is in or out of my control. So, for example, when I'm driving, right? This comes and goes, but there have been many times over the years here in LA where I realized that for some reason driving was stressing me out. It was especially bad, or I don't know what it was. But what I then thought of was okay, well, here's my environment. I'm stuck on the 101 or whatever, and I'm in my car, but I also have my music up really loud. Maybe the music itself on some level is adding to the stress level because the BPMs are too high, or the guitar's got too much distortion, or whatever the case might be. And I said, I wonder what would happen if I turn the music off. And I turned it off. And it was quiet in the car. And suddenly I started to sense that my stress level came down a little bit.
Interesting.
I took control of what I could control in that environment, and I turned off. And so there have been times in LA where I would make it a rule. I'm not turning on any sound in my car while I'm driving. And I would go for a week or two and not do that. And suddenly driving is just more enjoyable.
Oh yeah. I'll have an 8 or 9 client day, and I'll get in my car and drive home for 20 minutes. And I will sometimes drive home just with nothing on.
So, okay, I got to ask you though, because, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but you just said something, you sort of glossed over something that I think is really powerful, right? You said 8 or 9 clients. Okay. Now, everybody listening to this podcast has probably clients, and it's the blessing and the curse of clients, right? Whether you're a psychotherapist or whether you're an artist or what have you, some clients are great. Many clients are mediocre, and then some are just nightmares, right? And we all love what we do if it weren't for the clients, right? It's the point, right? And managing your stress around a client is part of the challenge, right? And you as a psychotherapist are seeing clients, I'm guessing, that are across a spectrum of anxiety, everything from oh my God, I don't know what to do in my life, to, oh my God, I'm suicidal, and everything in between. What techniques, what strategies do you as a therapist apply to managing those clients? And so when you drive home, you're not freaking out about all of that stuff they're putting on you. How do you protect yourself?
It's a good question. It's a great question. When I first started, about I'm licensed 12 years, so pre-license 14 years ago. So about 14 years ago, I was working on my hours as a new fledgling therapist, learning the ropes.
Now, when you say work on your hours, you mean to get your certificate? Yeah. So how many hours do you have to get?
3,000 hours.
Oh, wow.
You have to go ahead and amass before you can go ahead and then sit down for the test and all of that.
Okay.
So I remember one day I had this one client that was really challenging for me. He kept pushing my buttons a lot. I was able to go ahead through my own therapy, figure out why this guy was pushing my buttons. He reminded me of perhaps, my childhood, blah, blah, blah. But one day, my girlfriend at the time, now wife, Sharon, came.
Shout out Sharon.
Hi, Sharon. She came home and I lost it. I could not stop crying. This client was just to the solar plexus, to the emotional solar plexus.
Wow,
right. And so over the next couple of years, I developed what they call a therapist's second skin, where you get, calloused in some ways, right?
Sure.
So that you can go ahead and you're more seasoned, right? And so you can go ahead and take those blows, those hits, and they don't hurt as much. So now, say 12 years removed from, or 14 years removed from that event, and, I'm able to, thankfully, depending upon the client situation, I am able to go ahead and take the blows where it doesn't rattle me or shake me as much.
Yeah.
Right. I sometimes will have a client. I've had suicidal clients, a lot of them. And certainly I can't take that lightly. I don't. And they do affect me. I am worried about them. But I try not to take this stuff home. Sometimes impossible. But, one technique that I do after every session, so my sessions are typically 45 to 50 minutes, the client will leave, I will write down my notes, and then I'll have about 5 or 6 minutes before my next client comes into the office. I'm lucky that I have a nice window, and I will stare out at the city. And I will just listen to the buzzing. I will just go ahead and just zone out for a moment and then just get centered. I do it every single session without fail. I will look out the window, and it's my way of getting centered. And there are other therapists that might sage their space or spritz some scent or do something,
and I kind of cleanse it
between
clients,
to smudge it. And I'm so ritualistic that there are things that I do. Even at the end of the day, I will do this ritual where I'll leave my office and I will pat myself, my right hand on my heart, and I will thank my office for the service it's done for the day.
Yeah, right.
I'll say thank you and I'll see you tomorrow.
Sure.
And then I do this gesture with both hands.
Well, it's kind of a sacred space, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I totally get that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. I mean, because we all bring our work home. I mean, it's so natural, right, to bring your work home with you. If you care about what you do, if you take it seriously, if you're a professional, if you're at a certain level. And yet at the same time, you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your family, you owe it to your clients, you owe it to any number of things, that to have those boundaries and protect certain time, certain space to not think about work. And, I'm wondering to what extent the techniques and the tools that you use as a therapist, I wonder to what extent those techniques and tools are similar or different than, say, physicians who are literally trying to stop the bleeding. Someone comes in, their life is on the line.
Right.
There are those of us who don't deal with another person's well-being may have a hard time understanding what it's like to manage that stress, because it is really a matter of life or death. I remember working in, I've worked in marketing services my whole career with a focus on consumer products marketing and advertising and design. And clients would get so upset about something, and rightfully so. They're spending a ton of money and they want it to be right. And
so you had to do some hand holding.
Well, just hand holding, but it's sort of like, wait a minute, why are you? This is fucking sugar water. It's a carbonated soft drink. We're not fighting fires and saving lives. Let's keep this in perspective, people. And I think that's a big part of the reason why I got out of that business, because one of my pet peeves in life is people who take themselves too damn seriously. Is some people get that right.
It's so interesting about how you're kind of, I get what you're saying about, it's like, why are you getting, all upset about the sugar water that you're peddling? I get there's a lot of actors who sometimes like ask themselves, what am I doing? I'm selling and being an actor. How's that being helpful at all? And I will tell them, you know what, man, if you can for a moment give someone a break and make them feel better or okay or distracted for valuable. 5 minutes, that sugar water, by the way, for that person who took a sip of that sugar water, made them feel good because, the tasty neurotransmitters were making them feel good, then so be it, right? At the end of the day, I think that we all kind of want to have moments of feeling okay and good. So be it sugar water or whatever gets you through.
Yeah.
Because I think I was thinking about what do people use to, and I've even said this to you, which I have to maybe rephrase that, I've said that, we're all addicted to something. And that's not a new phrase. It's not something I've coined. And there are a lot of addiction specialists out there who take umbrage with that idea because you're minimizing that there are actually severe addicts out there.
Yeah.
Right. So instead of saying, we're all addicted to something, I now say we all lean on something.
Yeah, we all have a crutch.
We all have a crutch, and we should.
Yeah.
Right. We're the only species, I think, that knows we're going to die.
Right.
Right. So we have our own mortality issues that we have to confront. And so we have to learn how to go ahead and distract ourselves and get through it. And if that is with, exercise or relationships or caffeine, it's like, as long as it's somewhat functional and not dysfunctional.
Yeah. Well, and that's sort of an interesting segue into something I want to talk about at the conference when we do our panel there. A lot of folks are self-medicating, especially now in California with the legalization of marijuana, which I don't know if it's still called medical marijuana. At one point it was, medicinal. Now it's recreational. I'm guessing there are plenty of folks out there smoking weed to relax, to distress, but how much is too much? What's the healthy balance to strike?
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of clients that do rely on the weed product, CBD or the actual weed itself. And I mean, I think the definition in the DSM of, which is the diagnostical, psychological, that we therapists use to diagnose people, if it is affecting your personal life or your professional life, then you probably have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's not, if you're using it recreationally and it's just like, you know what, at the end of the day, you know, instead of coming home and having a gin and tonic, you've got to take a couple of hits off the whatever and it chills you out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see it as a problem, you know, but I do have mostly, it's interesting, a lot more men that I see smoke the weed more than women.
Sure.
They do complain to me at times that their significant others don't like it when they do smoke.
Yeah.
Which I totally understand, right? It's kind of like if I went home and had a glass of wine with dinner and, you know, my wife was not drinking, it's kind of like you want to have maybe that shared experience.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be on that same level plane, right? And a lot of, right? But if you're smoking the weed and your partner's not smoking the weed.
You're impaired. There's something about you that's why you smoke the weed to begin with, to somehow unplug, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the CBD, you know, a lot of people are using CBD right now, I get, which is what they've eliminated as much of the THC as they can to not have that psychotropic effect. You know, I haven't read too much about CBD. I know a little bit about it, you know, and if it's a pain ointment, so to speak, that you're using due to mental pain or physical pain, so be it. Have at it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm an advocate for it. I mean, you know, as long as it's not crippling or derailing, you know, you professionally or personally.
Well, right. And it's, again, I think everything in moderation and, you know, arguably a natural plant, although there's some debate to be had as to just how natural some of these super engineered flowers are, but something that grows out of the earth, just generally for me, just, you know, not being an expert here, but just, I'm just going to be more open to something that's natural versus something that's artificial. Alcohol being a good example of something that's arguably more dangerous or less healthy than.
You know, the interesting thing about alcohol is I think that the generations below us, below Gen X, I've read studies now that they're drinking less, smoking more, using CBD more, and drinking less alcohol.
Yeah.
You know, that's actually even more socially acceptable.
Right.
Is that they're, you know, taking a little CBD ointment or whatever, sublingual, or, you know, smoking a little bit instead of drinking.
Yeah. Have you ever had clients come in high or drunk?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely high. Drunk, probably, and over the last, of course. I mean, over the last like 14 years, I've had some come in drunk and nothing good happens.
Yeah, but I mean, so how does that? Do they tell you they're drunk or high? Or do you just sort of ask them? You sense it?
Some now they're smoking so much weed. I mean, it unfortunately is just how they go about their days now.
Yeah,
you know, I have a couple of people actually in the weed business themselves peddling the product, right? So they're around it 24/7.
So they're in the business. You have a couple clients in the business.
Yeah, they live with it.
Yeah,
you know, and they're always on it. It's just so readily available.
Right.
Could you imagine if you were working at the Doritos factory? I'd have Doritos bags all over the place, dipping into the Cool Ranch.
You'd have orange lips and fingers.
Yes, God.
Yeah, that's funny.
So yeah, I mean, they do come in high at times, and I'll ask them if they've smoked. I don't know how honest they are. Some I have one person who say, I did smoke today. But that person is fairly lucid. He's able to connect, and it now just becomes the new normal for them.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I have been to therapy, my own therapy, a couple times over the years. Say, like, I've been at a bar, I've had a couple of drinks, meeting a friend or something. It's like, oh, I got to go. I got to get to my therapy session. And I've just realized, like, I felt like I wasted my money in therapy, right? Because of those couple of drinks, just, I couldn't connect. I was altered, you know, and at least for me with therapy, it's like, I lost my religion a long time ago. And so, like, therapy for me is sort of my church in some ways. It's like, it's a very sacred thing. Like, I take it pretty seriously. And so I just realized I'm not really getting the most out of it if I go in there somewhat altered. Like,
and your therapist then would go ahead and ask you, wonder with you if you unconsciously sabotaged the therapy that day, knowing you were going to therapy. Yeah, you'd have a couple of drinks beforehand, right?
Or I was just multitasking.
Or you're just multitasking.
Or I'm just an alcoholic. But it's my own, but I self-corrected, right?
You know what's really interesting about you talking about, you know, coming, like having a wasted opportunity with therapy, coming in a bit altered. It makes me think about when I was in therapy, and I've been in and out of therapy since I'm 19 years old. I would often go in dressed like I am today.
So like in a tuxedo?
in a tuxedo. Well, I'm wearing a pair of, skater Vans and a plaid shirt and some jeans. Yes. And I would go in wearing, and maybe I'd wear like a Dodger baseball cap or whatever. And I'd go in and I was able to tap into the 15-year-old in me that maybe needed some of that work. If I would come in my therapist gear, like dressed for therapy, into my therapist's office, the therapy was different.
Interesting.
It was I was more of this adult version of me now doing therapy versus the kid. Yeah. And it's funny when I'll have people come in for therapy, depending on what they're wearing, it's interesting about how they then present. If they're coming in, if a female executive's coming in and she's got the pantsuit on, everything, she's an executive. She's in executive mode. But if she came in arbitrarily at 7:00 that night or 10:00 on a Saturday, right, and she was wearing jeans and tennis shoes, whatever, the therapy is at times different.
Yeah. No, I totally get that.
Are you buttoned up or are you dressed down?
Yeah.
And how does that affect the therapy?
Well, and I wonder what kind of guidelines there are in your profession around this, because like I can or if there are guidelines around this, and what are the best practices and what has shown to have the best metrics or, healthy outcomes, right? Because I'm just thinking again about my own experience, and I go to see my shrink at 7 p.m. on a Monday night, and it works well for me. But I've done that for a long time, but I have seen him during business hours, right? From time to time, you have to reschedule or whatever. And I can just tell you that it's totally different because I go in amped up, and I can't, when I leave, I have to get right back in the game versus if I go at 7:00 and I leave at 8:00 at night, I come in, my day is over. And so I'm more stressed, but maybe I'm also more relaxed. I'm not on edge, or I'm not but then I leave at 8 and it's the end of my night and I can just process everything better. I feel like I'm getting more out of my session by going at the end of the day versus the middle of it.
Well, that's interesting in that I started with a new client and ended with a new client fairly quickly, in that this client only had time to come in at 7:00 at night. Mm-hmm. And by the time he got to my office, he was spent from his workday.
Yeah.
And so he'd come in and he'd very just kind of like twisting in his seat. And we did this maybe for 4 or 5 sessions over 4 or 5 weeks. And he decided, you know what, I can't do this. I can't do this time because I'm just so exhausted.
Yeah.
And, maybe at some point I'll see him again when his schedule opens up, and maybe he comes in at 3:00 in the afternoon, because time is so important, I think, for the client. Can they go ahead and do the work at 10 a.m. better than they could do it at 7 p.m.? Or, time is very, and also as a therapist for me, I start my day around 10 a.m. By 7:00 for myself even. And I tend to not take a 7:00 client because I know that, I'm done.
Yeah.
Time is very, very important. And it's interesting you talk about, circling back to like, say, an executive type that comes in at 1:00 in the afternoon on a lunch break, knowing I am going back into my office after this. They, I find, will not allow themselves to go to those depths because they know they have to go back and perform at the office.
Right.
If they came in on a Saturday morning or came in at the end of the workday, it's totally different.
So shifting gears just for a little bit, you tend to see, because you're in LA and this is an entertainment-centric town, you tend to see a lot of entertainment professionals, many of whom are executives, but I'm guessing a lot of them are artists. So when I say artists in a broad sense, so they're actors or writers or producers or directors, all those people are artists. What are some of the common struggle that you see? Are there common struggles across those different labors?
You're only as good as your last project. There's a lot of that, right? So there's always that constant need to prove yourself because the competition is so fierce, right? So just because you did a great documentary that did great at Sundance one year or last year, it's like, okay, that was last year. So that pressure to continually have to perform, to put out new product, because there's someone right behind you.
Yeah.
It's just amazing how I'll think about, some filmmakers that I've loved over the years, and I'm just like, where are they?
Yeah.
Right? So the competition can sometimes just break you down. So I find a lot of that just they're looking in the rearview mirror at the competition behind them. That becomes difficult.
Interesting. It's like the curse of success, right? It's like, how do you stay on top? Right. Yeah. First of all, how do you get on top?
Yep.
And then once you're there, how do you stay on top?
Yep.
I don't know. I mean,
it's exhausting. It's exhausting for them.
Well, and going back to, I guess, this kind of more fundamental theme about stress and managing it and what have you. Meditate. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I think that meditation, everyone, there's a lot of people who won't meditate because I'm like, I don't do it right. I'm not doing it right.
No,
if you set the intention, to go ahead and sit for 10 minutes and use whatever app you need if you need it, or just do it by yourself, and you set the intention of sitting yourself for 10 minutes and just, slowly counting inhalations and exhalations and listening to the different sounds and whatnot, just putting in that work will be kind of soothing for you.
And I totally get that and agree with that. And
do you meditate?
Not often. At times, and I don't have a regular practice. I should, but I exercise fairly regularly. I do other things. I dance with my kids randomly and often. That is hugely therapeutic. Families that dance together stay together.
I'm going to come over more often. So I can
come on over, man. Shake your booty with the powers. So, but the point I want to get at, because going back to talking about core drivers for stress, right? Because I feel like it's that old saying, like if you pull the weed, you don't get the root, the weed's going to grow back, right? And so in this case, like I wonder to what extent artists, your clients perhaps, and other artists out there are under so much stress because they have unrealistic expectations, right, about their work or their success or their happiness or what have you. Like, so for example, we live in a culture of instant gratification. We live in a culture, we're fetishizing productivity and performance and success. And there's this culture about, well, read this book, apply this philosophy, do this technique, and it's going to expedite your success, your happiness, your productivity, your performance. You're going to achieve. And the reality is, like, I feel like that is just setting people up for failure 9 times out of 10, because it feels like to me, life and finding success, however you define it, and finding happiness, however you define it, it's a long play. It's not.
You're so right. I have a lot of artist types in all parts of the industry that do get seduced by the finish line, the trophy on the mantle, right? And it's hard for me not to go ahead and think you're missing it.
Yeah,
you're not understanding that it's part of the journey.
Yeah,
it's part of the ride.
Right.
It isn't, because if you've already lost the moment. If you're already thinking about, the trophy on the mantle, it's kind of like, who's that for?
Right.
Is that for other people? Who are you doing this for then?
Yeah.
Are you doing this for yourself, or are you doing this for other people?
Right.
So it's all about, being able to go ahead and really take stock. Why are you doing this? Why do you want to become an actor? Why do you want to be a painter? Why do you want to be a writer?
Yeah.
Who are you doing this for?
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes I'll even go back with some of my clients and talk to them, ask them, remind me, who are you doing this for? And sometimes they've forgotten. Right.
Yeah.
And that becomes somewhat perhaps a sad realization is I've forgotten who I'm doing this for.
Yeah.
Let's go back then and think about when you started, right? When you started painting, how did it make you feel?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I felt alive. I felt like I could go ahead and express myself in a way that I couldn't as a child. Think about that moment for a second. How does it make you feel? Where does that resonate in your body? Well, I'm feeling that in my heart right now.
Yeah.
That's what you're seeking then.
Yeah.
Right. Reminding yourself, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Who am I doing this for?
Yeah.
So going back to the root, right? The root that you planted, right? That maybe has gotten out of control, right? Maybe you haven't done the proper maintenance on it. Go back to the root of why you started this pursuit. Any pursuit. Why did you go to law school? Why did you want to learn how to be a chef? Why are you doing it? Some people, unfortunately, can't change direction, maybe, right? They're like, all right, so how do you go ahead and rethink that? Right? I am pot committed at this point. Right? These are the cards that I've got. I put all my chips in. Now, how do I be okay with it?
Yeah.
Right. Which in of itself can be
100%
extremely existentially challenging.
Yes.
This is my life. I have done this myself. I'm 62 years old, say, and I can't make perhaps like a professional change, but maybe you could start doing something on a personal level that makes everything else maybe more palatable. Do something a bit different. Start a new hobby. Learn a foreign language.
Volunteer something.
Volunteer. Yeah. Right. I mean, they talk about the metrics of volunteer work that, you get back 10 times what you give into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously everybody's journey is, unique to them, and there is no silver bullet, but it feels like there are principles and there are values and there are concepts that can be healthier than others, right? Or and so I guess what I'm getting at is this idea of why you do something. Like, if you don't enjoy the process, then you probably shouldn't be doing it.
I might disagree a little bit with that.
Okay.
Push back a bit with that because, there's that great Hemingway line, I don't write, I bleed. So, so for some artists, it is that kind of wrenching experience, where they put their soul, and it's hard and it's difficult. But maybe though, at the end of the day, like with Hemingway, maybe he can look at the blood on the pages and go, I'm really proud of what I've done.
Yeah.
If it is if it's dysfunctional, well, Hemingway might be the best example of that because he did go a little crazy and then did eventually.
Well, he had mental health issues.
Well, they killed himself. Yeah, they killed himself. So, I mean, but he still, though, I think if you asked Hemingway today, how would you do it differently? I don't know if you would do it differently.
Well, he seemed like a guy that sort of lived life on his own terms. He went out on his own terms, which is, by the way, I respect, quite frankly. Yeah. It takes a lot of courage.
But you talk about the reevaluation, though. Were you hinting at maybe a reevaluation of what you're doing?
No. What I'm getting at is that, at least what I've learned in my own life, in my own artistic creative journey, is that the compensation has often been in the process. Like, I love the process of creating and of producing I like the nature of my work. There's compensation in that. And if I'm able to then take my work and monetize it further, obviously that's the point. There's rent to pay. But some months are better than others and some years are better than others. And the fluctuation of my revenue or my compensation varies greatly, but my happiness doesn't, because I love what I do. I love the process.
Yep.
And that's what I'm getting at. I mean, if you don't, because, a lot of artists say, oh, I'm waiting for inspiration. Well, you know what? Chuck Close said inspiration is for amateurs. I mean,
Chuck Close said that?
Yeah.
I love him.
And part of it is about the work. I mean, if you're Hemingway, if you're a writer, if you're a painter, whatever, you got to go and do the work. And a lot of times it's painstaking. You're not going to be inspired, but you work through that to get to the inspiration, to get to and you've got to just enjoy the process of the work.
Yeah, Stephen King, wrote that famous book on writing, and Stephen King's one of the most prolific writers we've ever seen. It's unbelievable. I'm not sure if he's at
never heard of him.
56 books. Yeah. He's written some really interesting books, Scott.
Yeah.
I've actually been on a bit of a Stephen King jag.
Oh, yeah.
I've been reading a little bit of Stephen King, but he talks about the process of writing, of just like putting in the 3,000 words a day, and then setting your time from say 9 to noon or 9 to 1. And that's what you write, and you just do it, and you do it without fail. You don't really edit yourself, and you just get it down.
Right.
So, I mean, it just depends on how you envision yourself as an artist. What kind of work do you need to do? Is it a 14-hour purging, or is it a 1 hour a day? What works for you?
Well, it feels like intention and motivation, all these things, going back to what you're saying about why are you doing something. Like, if you're doing something just for the money, right? Then you got to explore that. For example, in your case, right, you got to a point where it sounds like you decided, you had a moment of clarity where it's like, no, you know what? Like, I want to help people. I want to help myself. I want to go into therapy. And then when it came time to logging in your 1,000 hours or 3,000 hours, whatever it was, to get your license, like, that wasn't daunting to you.
Well, it's interesting, circling back to this idea of you're doing it all for the money.
Yeah.
When I got out of Hollywood and was trying to figure out what to do with myself, and my dad, he was a stock trader, and he had said to me, hey, why don't you come in and we'll trade together. And my whole life, and for the next couple of years, was consumed around making money.
Yeah. Wow.
And I was so unhappy on a daily basis, because I'd have my good days and have my bad days. My life was consumed about the dollar signs and my relationship with my girlfriend, Sharon, now wife.
Shout out Sharon.
It struggled.
Yeah.
And I had to go to therapy because I was a mess. And it was in therapy after, 6 months that I realized, with my working with this great therapist, that I didn't want my life to be consumed around making money. I wanted to do some soulful work.
Yeah.
And that's when she said, you'd be a great therapist. And I wasn't baiting her. I wasn't like, I didn't need that from her.
Right.
But that's why it made sense. It's like, you know what? That is meaningful work. I mean, isn't that what we all kind of strive for, is to do meaningful work that matters, that has purpose?
Yeah. Yeah. I saw my dad go to work, to a job every day that he hated. And he did it dutifully. He did it honorably. He did it for his family. He did it for his kids. He liked being an electrician. He liked building homes, but I
didn't know that your dad was an electrician.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. But he also worked for, I grew up in the Midwest outside Chicago near Gary, Indiana. And so the sort of the industrial Rust Belt in some ways, there's a lot of steel mills in there. And so my dad worked for U.S. Steel for 30 years and would drive to Gary, Indiana and go to a dirty, dingy, hot, dangerous steel mill and work doing electrical work, sometimes 1,000 feet in the air.
Noble work.
No, I mean, just, hey, honorable, noble work. But he hated it. But he did it dutifully, and he did it.
Would he bring back that energy and negativity home?
No. My dad's a very stoic guy.
He's good at hiding it.
Very stoic, man's man. Do your work and then come home and go work more.
Well, I think that's why family connection is so important. If you're doing a job that you really hate, and you go home and you're appreciated, say, from your family for that hard work.
Yeah.
Right. You're able then to go ahead and be embraced by a loving family, and you can have those wonderful moments. Then it makes it then it makes it worth it, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is, just growing up, watching him was inspirational on a lot of levels. But I also knew I didn't want to be a corporate suit either. But I did know that I wanted to have what I considered to be an unconventional, interesting life.
Which you've had. Congratulations.
Well, thank you, but I'm not dead yet. No, but I mean, the point is that I think you have to have a vision, right, for what you want your life to be. You have to have the courage enough to pursue that vision. You have to have a lot of luck,
so much luck.
All that stuff. And that's the thing. I think luck gets underrated. I mean,
really, it really does. I mean, time and place of meeting certain people, and then it becoming some sort of domino effect that all of a sudden, you've got a great life and blah, blah. Yes, absolutely.
So all these things line up or they don't. And then you're dealt with a certain amount of cards and you play the cards you're dealt with. And by the way, I was dealt in many ways a very fair hand, and I might've played it well and had some good luck. But believe me, I mean, there are people that were dealt shitty cards that played far better and did far better than I did. But that doesn't mean I'm any less happy. And that doesn't mean that they're any more happy. Yeah. Because I think that goes back to so many of these things. It's like, are you enjoying the nature of your work? Are you enjoying the process? Are you being fair to yourself? Are you loving yourself? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you having the right expectation and the right perspective?
Eleanor Roosevelt said, she had so many great quotes, but one of them was, happiness is a byproduct. And what she meant by that is that this notion that we should always be happy, right? Yeah. Our parents, they just want us to be happy.
Yeah.
That's, by the way, a lot of pressure.
Yeah, right.
For a child or a young adult.
Right.
Saying, if I'm not happy, I'm doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Eleanor Roosevelt, with the line, happiness is a byproduct, what she means by that is just if you have meaning and purpose in your life, you're going to be happy along the way.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And, it's like that old saying, too, about the only thing you really can control is your attitude, and again, those things in our environment that we have control of, managing them, in a healthy way. Our attitude is is one of the things that we can control.
Absolutely.
And so what are you bringing? Are you bringing positivity or negativity? And I bring both. I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm some positive guy all the time. Fuck no. Matter of fact, talk to the people who are closest to me. They probably tell you that I can be very negative and dark, but that's just because I'm aware of, my mortality, I guess.
Well, I think that exists in all of us, the light and the dark, right? It depends. Are we more one over the other? Is it right. fairly
well,
equal?
You said something earlier I wanted to comment on, because it's like somebody once told, I remember years ago at work, I was frustrated over a client, and I felt like the client was being unreasonable or whatever the case it was. And my boss, who was 20 years my senior anyway, one of these sage white hairs that been there, seen it all, done it all. And he sort of put his hand on my shoulder and he said, Scott, he goes, it's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just a real thing. And I remember that. I was like, wow, that's like kind of sage advice.
It is sage advice. I think it's sage advice. I think that advice could resonate more effectively if you're brought up with that. Right?
Sure.
I mean, because I think at early ages we're taught, what's negative, what's positive, what's good, what's bad, versus this idea of it's just being real. I think if you're brought up, fortunately enough or luckily enough, with that type of idea or notion, I think that you're able to go ahead and you've been able to root in that versus the idea now you're saying about someone saying that to you now.
Yeah.
Which I love it in theory. I'd love to practice that in theory.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, a la the stuck in traffic. This is a real moment.
Yeah.
Right? This is neither good nor bad.
Right.
This just is.
This just is.
This is, right? It seems like that would probably be some sort of Buddhist type of thing, right? It just is.
Yeah.
Why do we have to put a judgment on it?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you say that because in my own work with my own therapist, and I've seen him for a long time now, but early on he would say, because I always refer to myself as an asshole, like I'm a fucking asshole, blah, blah, and he called me out on it. He said, Scott, you're not an asshole. You're just a good person with flaws, and I was like, why do I have to be a good person with flaws? Like, can't I just be a human being?
That is a human being.
Right.
I mean, a human being, we're all flawed, right?
No, exactly. And that for me, like, cause that's like, I guess I want to get to a point where I don't think of the terms that I don't want to think in terms of like, I'm a good person or a bad person, or I'm an asshole or I'm a good person. Like, I just want to be a human being. I just want to be cool with being a human being.
Yep.
With all of our blessings and curses.
I know that we wanted to talk a bit more about artists and how, during these stressful times, what they can be doing to refuel or to be able to weather where vicissitudes, the ups and downs of their crafts take them, which reminds me of, because I think you're hinting at that a lot of artists ultimately fail along their journeys, right? They're constantly, even going to an audition and not getting it.
Yeah.
Right. You have failed.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Putting a painting up in a cafe that you want to sell for X amount of money and it's not getting sold. Well, I guess I've failed.
Yeah.
Right. Eleanor Roosevelt, another great quote. If you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah.
Right. So they were always failing. Yes. I will go ahead and I'll make an interpretation or use a metaphor in therapy that might not land at all well. Maybe it was a clumsy analogy or a clumsy metaphor, a clumsy interpretation, but I'm putting myself out there. Yeah. Right. And I'm okay with failing.
Yeah.
Right. If we can get better I think we need to just get better at failing.
Now there's, all these other kinds of philosophies or adages or proverbs or what have you that talk about if you're learning, you're not failing. If you didn't meet the goal, okay, fine. You can feel bad about that. You needed that goal to achieve that goal for various reasons, but did you learn? Can you up your game from that? Can you improve next time? And there's value and compensation in that.
What are your thoughts though about everyone gets a trophy? Like, the kids will be in soccer or whatever and using that as an example, like everyone gets a trophy, first place, second place, 10th place, everyone gets something.
Yeah. Well, of course, we all come from our own experiences, right? I mean, I grew up at a time where, only winners got trophies. And sometimes I got a trophy and sometimes I didn't. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot losing, probably more from losing than more from winning. So when it comes to giving every kid a trophy, I fear that we do them a disservice because life is hard, life is tough, life is indifferent. You need to have a thick skin. You need to have endurance and perseverance and resilience and grit. And I don't know that giving a kid a trophy for mediocre performance or just showing up is necessarily teaching them grit. I'm not an expert. I don't know. I think the jury's out. We'll see. Maybe after it's too late.
Well, Jonathan Haidt, Haidt, I believe, has written a book called The Coddling of the American Mind.
Yeah.
Kind of believes that, that we are coddling the generations below us a bit too much.
Yeah.
And that they're not maybe getting this grit that they need, that in corporate America, when they're let go, what do you mean I'm let go? I'm fired for what? I'm sorry. I'm showing up. I'm doing the best that I can. Don't I get a trophy? No, you're fired. You can go look for a new job, right? And then they're moving back home. So I think that I need to actually read this book. I know he's doing the podcast rounds himself, but I do think I appreciate that little Timmy is doing his best on the soccer field and his team comes in 10th and they lose. And I want to go ahead and say, hey, you know what, bud, you did great. You did great this season. I'm so proud of you. Can't that be enough? Shouldn't that be enough versus the medallion or the trophy? Right. Why can't that be enough?
Yeah. Or let's flip it and just say this. Nobody gets a trophy or a medal. Nobody. You really show up, you play the game, The score is the score.
The scores. Wait, so at the end of the day, at the end of the season, no one gets a trophy for best?
No. You just know you were the best.
You just know you were the best.
Like it's like if you're keeping score.
I got you. So
you know what I mean?
Know,
there's no symbol.
I kind of love that. So so if you have 10 teams and you're still keeping a record of how those 10 teams did.
Yeah.
And say the Cobras were 14-0 and the second place Zebras were 13-1. You know that the Cobras know. So they don't need to have the pageantry of getting a trophy. They know.
They don't need the jewelry.
I like that. I think that would be very effective.
You know, it's just like, okay, we all know it's a focus on the data. It's a focus on the numbers, focus on the facts. Why do you need all the symbols and all the jewelry that goes with it? Because that's what people have started obsessing about, right?
Sure.
That's the external kind of representation of that kind of information. So you know what? Just take it away.
I always think it's nice to have a little bit of a stake in something that you do get. You do get something that shows.
Well, then I agree with that. Yeah.
You know, it's like I'll play a poker game and with the boys. It doesn't matter if the buy-in is $5 or $500.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, right? It's about, did I get all the chips this time or not?
Right.
It's all about that kind of competition and having something that is tactile that you can feel, that you can showcase, you know, for your efforts. I just don't think that everyone necessarily should get something.
Well, no, it's fascinating because, I mean, when you give a trophy to everyone, then suddenly, how is the trophy valuable?
It's a bit diminished, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but then if you take it away, then it doesn't have any value either.
Yeah.
But maybe in a better way, or not. Maybe, you know, I listen, again, I'm biased, right? I grew up wanting that trophy.
Yep.
And sad when I didn't get it. And
I think why I'm bringing this up is like those that go to auditions, a lot of the actors that I see will go to auditions and they become so frustrated by not getting it, thinks that it's unfair. And a lot of them, or some of them, I think did grow up in a bit of a coddling atmosphere where they were told that they were the best, which, hey, you know, I think that's a parent's job in some ways, is to continue to tell your kids how great they're doing. And maybe they were always told that they were doing great. Then the hard life hits them in the face of, oh my God, there are people as good, if not better than me.
Yeah.
And having them to go ahead and reckon with that. Like, I'm not as good or as special as I once thought I was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, a lot of these kids, right? I mean, they were the hottest, most talented, most beautiful person in their small town, USA. They won the medals and the trophies, and then they said, oh, well, I better go to LA. And turns out they're just a dime a dozen in LA.
Yeah.
And that's got to be a shock.
A shock.
You know? I know it was a shock for me when I came out of high school. I started working when I was 13, and I had some real jobs. I mean,
working the docks.
Working the docks. I did start working at 13 on construction sites because my dad was in construction and what have you. But then in high school, I worked as a physical and occupational therapy aide for a couple of years in hospitals in the area. But then in high school, right out of high school, I started working at a publishing company 3 months before my freshman year of college. We started in June of 1988. And the point is that suddenly I was put in this environment where I realized, like, I was no one. I was nobody. I was less than no one. And my boss was not a coddling boss. On my first day of work, my boss told me, Scott, welcome. We're glad to have you. But I want to just tell you a couple things. He said, some people will tell you that there are no stupid questions. I don't believe that. I think there are stupid questions, and I don't want you coming to me with the stupid questions. I want you to use your brain, try to figure out the best solution. And when you can't figure it out, then you come to me and you ask me about it, but then you still bring some possible solutions. Don't just bring me problems. And I mean, he was like, literally, I'm 18 years old and I'm hearing this going, holy fuck, like this is so not what I expected. Now, was he right? Who knows? But in hindsight, you know, almost 32 years later or whatever, I'm grateful for that.
When you first said this to me, I was a bit like, oh no. I mean, I think that's a bit harsh.
It was totally harsh.
I would think that I understand what he's saying. He's like, he doesn't want to make it easy for you.
Right.
Right. So it's kind of like, I would hope that he would say to you, before you ask me the question, did you exhaust everything that you could in trying to figure out the answer for yourself?
Right. That's right.
And if you could then authentically say, I did, then he should then be able to go ahead and say, ask me your question, and it's no longer a stupid question.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right. Well, listen, I mean, it was, although it freaked me out in the moment, I would eventually come to really believe that it was very empowering. And yet he could never do that now. I don't think an 18-year-old kid coming into that job now would have, I mean, they would have tweeted it, blogged it. My boss said this, and then there would have been all these haters piling on the boss for being an asshole, and, at the end of the day, like, I just feel like I was ultimately better for it just because it was a lesson in real life.
Do you employ that with your own kids?
It's fascinating. That's a great question. My approach to parenting, it stresses me out. I mean, being a parent stresses me out because, obviously it's, you're trying not to kill them or fuck them up too much.
Isn't the ultimate goal is to give your kids the tools to survive without you, ultimately?
Yes. Ultimately, the way I think about it is I am trying to create the space for them to become who they're meant to become. And that's it. And so sometimes that means being hands-on. Sometimes that means being hands-off. I don't want to be a helicopter parent. I don't want to be a snow plowing parent.
I don't even know what a snow plowing.
Oh, you haven't heard this phrase?
No.
Oh, yeah. This is the new thing.
What's snow plowing?
Yeah. So plowing or snow plowing is this notion or idea that a parent is clearing the way of all of life's troubles and hassles so that they have this smooth transition.
Well, that would be circling back to the coddling approach.
100%. Right? It's 100% coddling.
Yeah.
And in 10X. And, for me, I'm not, if my kid rides their bike without a helmet, I tell them to wear the helmet. They don't wear the helmet, they fall and hurt themselves. Yeah, you know what? I feel bad, but at the end of the day, they learn something. I'm not going to freak out. I mean, and I'm digressing, but I mean, getting back to your question, I mean, I'm not trying to make my kids' life easy. It's inherently easy because they, grew up on a.
I guess I'm wondering, like, if either of your kids said, "Hey, Daddy, why is the sky blue?" Is to say, you know what? It's a great question.
Yeah.
I want you for a moment to think about why you think the sky is blue. Right. And then if you want to tell me that now, great. If you need a few minutes or an hour, fantastic. Come back, circle back with me, and then tell me why you think it's blue.
Yeah.
And then they come back and they say, well, I think it's blue because it just is. It's painted that way. And you go, you know what? That could be a great answer. I love that answer.
Yeah.
We could go with that. Right? Or we could go ahead that it's the sun hitting the oceans and it's illuminating the sky blue.
Yeah.
Right? That could be the answer too.
Yeah.
Right? Or giving them actually the real answer, which I think actually that is a real answer. But allowing them the opportunity to go ahead and try to answer the question.
100%. I think I do a good job reasonably asking them what they think, empowering them to make a choice, so on and so forth.
Well, I think, circling back to the artists, why am I not getting the painting sold? Why am I not getting the audition? Why do you think you're not?
Yeah.
Why do you think you're not? Well, the competition is too fierce or blah, 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 blah. That could be. It's like there are always a lot of artists that are struggling. Why? Why is this happening?
Well, let me ask you this, though, real quick, because I can tell you, and again, artistic community is not a monolithic community, right? I mean, it is anything but. It is very diverse.
Well, yeah, you live in this world much more than I do.
Well, but even in the, when I talk about the artistic community, I'm talking about the creative economy, which includes architects to actors to painters to, reality is, quite frankly, there are a lot of folks out there, and this gets back to having realistic expectations. Like, I feel like a lot of creatives out there just have unrealistic expectations. And quite frankly, there's a high level, it seems, of immaturity and narcissism that's impacting their performance and impacting their success.
I always wrestle with doing some reality testing with artists, with actors. I don't know if educate's the right word, but I will go ahead and tell them the odds of you becoming a working actor is 1%.
Right.
You have a 99% chance of it not happening.
Yeah.
1%. And what I mean by working actor is that you're making over $40,000 a year.
Right.
Right. It's like the odds are stacked so much against you that you have to want to do this more than anything else. I can't do anything else but act.
Right.
That I love it so much, and I'll do anything for it. I'll work odd jobs. I don't care because I love it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
By the way, if you're that person, you've won. Right. In many ways.
That's right.
It's those that, are thinking about stardom and all of that. Those are the ones that often, struggle. And I don't want to go ahead and dissuade anybody really from pursuing their craft.
Yeah.
I just want them to know how difficult it is to go ahead and make any of it really work or get seen.
Yeah. I was talking to an artist the other day, and we were sort of talking about some of these issues and it within the visual art community, specifically in contemporary arts. And we were talking, there was this one artist in particular who was, on one hand, completely against signing a contract, which is business 101, and bitching about their station in life, right? Or the station in their career. And I said, you know what? As soon as you refuse to sign that contract, or you have some sort of like idealistic protest against signing, a corporate document or whatever, then you also forfeit your right to bitch about your station in life, right? Because again, getting back to the game, like if this is the game you're choosing to play, then you've got to play by the rules. Right. And the rules are that you sign that fucking contract.
Yep.
So it feels like, sometimes when it comes to a lot of this,
push-pull,
an artist's success and an artist's station in life, they're their own worst enemies, and some of them just need to grow the fuck up.
What do you think of, I think I take a lot of umbrage with how people will label somebody a sellout.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, they totally sold out, right? That they've got a song now, on a Vaughn's commercial or whatever. Right. Everyone ultimately wants to get heard, wants to get seen, and wants to get paid.
Yeah.
So, they're such a sellout.
Yeah. They're just jealous and envious.
And it could be that too, right? That jealousy.
I think that's what it is more times than not. They're just jealous and envious. They don't know what to do with those feelings. And they're not even self-aware enough to understand that they're jealous and envious.
Yep.
And so they just hate.
Yep.
And I just think a lot of times there's immaturity, there's lack of sophistication. You can't have it both ways. Lately, I've been saying, being a starving artist should be a personal choice, not an occupational hazard. And that's part of why we're doing everything we're doing with Not Real Art and the conference and the podcast and stuff, because, we're just trying to empower.
Yeah.
And we don't have a silver bullet. It's hard. I mean, 90% of small businesses fail. I don't care if you get into the game, it's hard. 99, to your point about being an actor, that's why you have to love what you do.
You have to. The artists that you sit down and talk with, what are you finding that they're struggling with most on a mental health perspective?
Wow.
Is it depression? Is it anxiety? Is it something even further than that? I mean, is it just, what are you seeing? What are they lamenting about? Is it fear-based?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I got to be careful because I don't want to paint with a broad brushstroke because I think a lot of it is very, unique and individualized.
And also, by the way, not only in that industry. I mean, this is pervasive.
Yeah.
Right? Insert occupation here.
Right.
Because everyone's struggling.
Yeah.
With either the anxieties but maybe artists, I don't know, do you think that they suffer more?
Well, I think arguably artists, in my experience, and I've known medical professionals, I've known finance professionals, I've known people in other industries. Artists, I think, do tend to be more at risk emotionally somehow, mentally. And this again, I could be totally wrong. This is just my observation, but I think they tend to deal with maybe or wrestle with depression more. That's again just my sense. What
came first, right? The depression before being an artist? Was it already there?
Right.
Predisposition biologically already there, which then led them into painting or acting or music or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And then when you're not being successful and you're struggling, does the depression, you triggered more by your depressive composition?
Yeah. And I think artists too, I'll just say it this way. I think it's not just unique to artists, it's people. I mean, people believe a lot of bullshit out there. Like if I don't sell out, or if I'm true to my values, or if I just try harder, or if I light this incense, whatever it is.
Sure.
And you need to do whatever you need to do, right? But the reality is it's fucking hard. And 9 times out of 10, it boils down to dumb luck. And
that's why networking is so important. In any field, but perhaps more in the arts game of networking, meeting people, introducing yourself. just continuing. That's also part of the game. So difficult for me early on in my career to go in my being a therapist, because I had to go ahead and sell myself, and I had to go do a lot of cold calling and knock on doors and right and go, hi.
Nobody likes cold calling. I don't care who you are. It sucks.
It's awful. Right. But you have to do that as an artist. You've got to go ahead and put the work in.
Yeah.
It's not just about the painting or the sculpture or the script or, that you can go ahead and memorize Shakespeare. That's part of it. Mm-hmm. There's so many facets to being able to be successful. And a lot of it's that little bit of work that people really do kind of resent. The art should just speak for itself. Sometimes it doesn't.
Hell no, it doesn't. And, the reality is, the art world, there's not a supply problem, there's a demand problem. There's way more art out there than there are people that know about it.
Yeah. And we have to do the differentiating in many ways. And I say that, we, the executives or because as you said, there's so much product out, so much great product out there that's not being seen, not being heard, not being read.
That's right.
Could you imagine? Right. I mean, there's got to be so much out there that we're never going to see the light of day of.
And we'll just end with this, but that is exactly why we created Not Real Art, the conference, the podcast, and the grant, because strategically and fundamentally, we exist to help artists tell their stories and promote their work. And that is because we feel like artists, first and foremost, have a demand problem, and we want to address that demand problem. And the demand is about addressing the demand problem. It's a marketing problem. It's a storytelling problem. We want to leverage storytelling and entertainment and edutainment in ways that make art and artists more accessible, more friendly, more available to people out there in the world who might be intimidated or turned off by the conventional art world, with its multi-million-dollar price tags and its fancy people. The reality is the artwork, quote unquote, that gets bought at Bed Bath & Beyond or Target, or, we've all seen these prints, right? These prints that you can buy at the local Kohl's or whatever. That is a $60 billion industry. It's called wall decor, the wall decor industry. The wall decor industry is a $60 billion industry. Don't tell me that 1, 2, 3, or 4% of those people wouldn't buy original art.
Oh, 1,000%. It's funny because, you have such great art in your house, and, over the years I've collected a few pieces here and there that didn't cost a lot of money.
No, exactly.
I have these really cool stencils that I have, a few of them that I bought maybe for 40, 50, 60 bucks that I love, that I covet. Yes. Right. And it makes me think about, and I wanted to ask you a question, and I'll get there. For me, when I started off as a therapist, I just wanted to work. Right. And I would go ahead and say, you know what, if you can pay me $40, great. Right. And I was honored for you to be there.
Yeah.
There are a lot of therapists might get licensed and go, well, no, fuck that. I'm not going to go ahead and do that. I have student debt perhaps, or, the going rate is $150, $200. No, I'm going to charge them $150 to $200, and they're not working. Yeah. Right. And I wonder for artists, for just arbitrarily using painters as the example, or the graffiti artists or the stencils, do you find that some are charging too much money from the onset versus just trying to go ahead and get their name out there, get their work out there, and could even lower their rate, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, you have both extremes. So you have artists that are absolutely overcharging because they have an overinflated sense of self, of self, and of what their art is worth and what the market will bear. Again, many of these artists and many people don't understand Business 101. And one of the principles of Business 101 is understanding what the market will bear in terms of your price. And absolutely, you should charge as much as you can get, but what can you get realistically? So you have to have that honest conversation with yourself. But then on the other hand, you have artists who are absolutely giving their work away for free, and they should not be doing that.
Could you please tell me who those are? Because right? I've got some wall space.
Exactly. Well, listen, I mean, there was, and this is another shameless plug here for the conference, but one of the panels I'm excited about this year at the conference is a panel called Exposure Bucks, How Loving Your Work is Killing Your Business. And this is because people who are passionate about their work, and it's not just artists, it's therapists, it's lawyers, it's doctors, are more vulnerable to exploitation. Okay. People who are passionate and love their work are more susceptible to be exploited. And because people say, hey, I have this need, can you come, and it's an opportunity, to do what you love. And so they do it. And so
because they're so passionate about what they do.
Because they're so passionate, they think they're contributing to social good and something bigger than themselves. And so they want to do it because that's just their heart and their calling. And so they're just more vulnerable to exploitation. Now, we're going to talk about this in the panel. And what's going to be great about this panel is that there's a Duke University professor, Dr. Aaron Kay, who is arguably the world's preeminent expert right now on this very issue. He's been researching this for years. Not just artists, but doctors and people who feel like they're contributing to the common good and greater good. They're just more vulnerable. So he has all this great empirical data to understand this issue. And so on this panel, we're going to talk about this. But we also have this graphic designer on the panel, Sarah Lawrence, who's coming from Atlanta. And several years ago, she had been so frustrated by all these clients, big companies, asking her to work for free. It'd be great exposure for you if you do this project. And so she created this meme that went viral, and it was just this funny comic of this woman holding these like exposure bucks. It was like, exposure bucks, pay your rent, buy your groceries, just do it for exposure. And so she's going to be on the panel.
Awesome.
And so
I can't wait to see this.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And so the point is that we want to address both of this. It's like, yes, there are people that are overcharging and people that are undercharging. And listen, doing free work or doing pro bono work is absolutely a viable strategy. Lawyers all the time do pro bono meetings.
Absolutely.
In business, they call them lost leaders. Like, absolutely. How much sampling? We go to Costco. These companies are doing sampling. Oh, have you tried these pigs in a blanket? Have you tried? Oh, let me try that. Oh, yeah, I'll buy that package. Absolutely, you should do some freebies, but not too much.
Yeah. Don't give it all away.
Don't give it all away. Bret Hofstein, it has been a pleasure to have you in the studio today, my friend.
I really enjoyed this. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to the conference, which is in a couple weeks.
19 days as of today. It's March 21st.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed speaking with you, and thank you for having me.
It's so great. I hope you come Friday night, if you can, March 20th.
It's in my calendar.
Okay. We have an art exhibition happening.
I'm embracing all of it.
All things not real art.
Yeah, all things not real art.
Bret Hofstein, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. Please be sure to like this episode and share it with your friends on social. And if you haven't already done so, please be sure to press subscribe and follow us on IG at Not Real Art Official. We appreciate the support. Sourdough out.